So why don't we start with telling the camera, what do you do? What brought you to the movement?
What do I do? I'm a website designer, developer, a graphic designer. I've been doing that for about 7 or 8 years now. What brought me into the movement? Well, I hadn't heard of the 9/11 Truth Movement until June of 2004 when I saw on C-SPAN 9/11 Citizens Watch critiquing the report that was about to come out. They were actually critiquing the entire process of the commission. I hadn't heard of a 9/11 Truth Movement up until that point. Once I did, then I started to become connected with people like Janice Matthews and Kyle Hentz and John Judge. When I first started to get interested is when in January of 2002, Bush and Cheney went to Tom Daschle's office and asked him to limit the scope of the congressional inquiry. They were essentially asking him not to really investigate the attacks. So I at that point I was curious as to why wouldn't they want to know how and why this happened, so as to make sure it never happens again. And I didn't really think of it too much after that. Then the August 6th PDB came out, I think it was in May of 2002. And if you remember, we heard a lot of people say there were no warnings, that the government never possibly conceived of something like that happening. And all of a sudden we have this August 6th PDB come out, which shows that they were warned of something like that happening. So once I found out they lied to us, obviously I became a little bit more interested. And then when I saw that they wanted to go to war prior to coming into office, and that they used 9/11 to go to war, obviously, I got very suspicious at that point. And also the family members had to fight for an investigation. They actually had to go. Lori Van Auken told me once that at a time when their kids were traumatized, they had to go down to Washington, D.C. to get their government to do its job. And that really hit home for me. I mean, I can't imagine what their kids were going through. Obviously, their kids wanted their remaining parent, to be there with them, and they couldn't be because they had to go find out how and why their loved ones were murdered. Because the government wasn't doing their job.
What brought you to 9/11 Truth in the terms of how has this impacted your life?
It's impacted my whole life. This is my life now. For about 6 years now, I really started late 2002, early 2003, and since then I haven't stopped. Constant reading, constant contacting of media and representatives, constantly blogging on the internet, posting news stories. I just haven't stopped. It's been, I spend a good 4 to 8 hours a day doing this after work. So I have a full-time job, and then I go and I take part in the 9/11 Truth, and it's an everyday thing. And as a result, it's taken up my whole life. My friends, they really don't even associate with me anymore. Because when I obviously started doing this, I was telling everybody about it, and everybody thought I was a nut. So obviously those relationships were strained, and they don't really exist anymore. I spend all my money on, a lot of my money on this, traveling to conferences, supporting the first responders. Every time I get an extra buck, I make a donation to the Feel Good Foundation. It's changed my way of thinking. Prior to 9/11, I was not a politico at all. I never voted. I didn't care what the news was telling me. After 9/11, I found myself glued to the television set. I had to know everything that was going on. And, you know, I finally voted in 2004. And it taught me, or it motivated me to teach myself to become a citizen again, or to become a citizen at all, compared to what I was prior to 9/11.
Hypothetically speaking, if you were talking to somebody who doesn't know about 9/11 truth, can you tell that person, if you had the chance, what would be the most important pieces of information or evidence that person would need to know in order to impact their understanding of 9/11? Assuming they don't know anything.
The family's called for a new investigation. You know, that essentially says that the 9/11 Commission that this country was sold as being credible was completely discredited. And it's powerful to me because every time I see a family member cry, I see Bob McIlvaine cry, I see Michele Little cry, it breaks my heart. Breaks my heart. Because, you know, we all go through this anger as we go through this process of finding out, you know, my God, they lied to us about this. There were 3,000 people murdered. How fucking dare they do this? And the anger that we feel is nothing compared to the anger, the despair, the anguish that the family members feel. Can you imagine? My God, first of all, they don't know who, how, and why their loved ones were murdered. Then, the names of the individuals that they lost have been used to start 2 wars, Afghanistan, Iraq, possibly Iran, Syria, Venezuela, wherever. Civil liberties are gone in the names of their loved ones. The country has been bankrupted in the names of their loved ones. Everything that has resulted as a result of 9/11 has been done in their names. I just can't imagine what they go through, and that hits home for me. What was the original question?
Well, if you were talking to somebody who wasn't familiar with 9/11.
Families. I mean, if you're a moral person, if you have a heart, how can you turn your backs on them? How can you do? I can't do it. I told Lori Van Alken today, I can't not do anything. I've tried to take a break from this, and I get depressed because, you know, all of these things are still going on, and I know this information, and you know, what was the purpose of me learning it if not to tell people about it, or, you know, educate people? So I have to be involved, otherwise, like I said, I get depressed, because I want the situation to be resolved.
So, what do you propose we do as a solution?
Well, part of 9/11 Truth is not only about truth, justice, accountability for the 9/11 attacks, it's also teaching America to be citizens again, to show an interest in what this country does. That's part of the process. And what do? I mean, we've tried so many things that have failed. It's a very hard question to answer. I'm a simple person. You know, I'm a Joe Schmo, everyday American. So to ask me how we fix the world's problems, I'm not qualified to tell you how to do that. But I do know that there needs to be accountability. You know, a government that is not accountable is a very dangerous government. And I do believe that if you do hold people accountable, you're going to see a lot less people doing the bullshit that they were doing, you know, prior to being held accountable. I don't know what the answer is. I can't tell you what the answer is. I hope that we discover what the answer is, because too many horrible things are happening right now.